right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this passionate discussion about AI and risks and insurance coverage and what would be the landscape of insurance policy and AI in the near future. I'm here today with our prominent panelists, Jaymin and Scott. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Alexandra Bochnakova, and I'm the president of the Washington Foreign Law Society, a nonprofit organization created in 1952 with the purpose of promoting knowledge and understanding of international law, international relations. We organize webinars, in-person events, almost one, sometimes even twice per month. And this event is part of our AI series, or how to prepare legal professionals for what is next. And that is the reason why we invite specialists of the field to enlighten us and try to understand better how the future of the legal profession will be shaped. We are organizing this event in collaboration with the Stimson Center, a leading foreign affairs tank based in Washington, D.C. That is normally represented by Kathryn, but for some reasons, probably technical, she's not here yet. I'll let her the floor when she comes to introduce the Stimson Center. On my side, I would invite you to visit our website of the Washington Foreign Law Society and subscribe to our letter or become a member so that you could join us for our future events. And without further ado, I will leave the floor to our panelists. I think it's going to be nicer if you can introduce yourself before we jump in the conversation. Jaymin, would you like to start, please?
Sure. Thanks, Alexandra, for having us here. So my name is Jaymin Kim, and I'm with Marsh, where I lead our work on emerging technologies, assessing whether there's new risks that are surfacing in correspondence with emerging tech, such as generative AI, agentic AI. We also look at augmented reality, quantum. It's really the full gamut. Once we assess whether there are new risks that have surfaced, where appropriate, we'll partner with different partners to develop insurance solutions, as well as risk mitigation offerings to serve the interests of end policies, organizations who need commercial insurance. So it's a pleasure to be with you today, and I'm looking forward to the discussion with Scott.
Thank you so much, Scott. Yeah.
Pleased to be here. My name is Scott Levitt. I'm an attorney in Covington and Burling's Washington, D.C. office. My specialty is insurance recovery for corporate policyholders, and in doing that, I do a lot of cyber work, including for things like ransomware events, data breaches, privacy violations. I also advise clients before they purchase cyber policies, whether those cyber policies fit their needs and whether there's language available in the marketplace that might better suit their particular risk profile. I'm happy to be here and look forward to a lively discussion today.
Thanks so much. I'm looking forward to learn with you today, guys. So just before we start this passionate conversation, I just want to invite our attendants to put their questions in the webinar chat, because it's like an interactive conversation. Please do not hesitate to chime in through the chat, and hopefully we will be able to answer, our panel will be able to answer all your questions. So let's start the basics. Let's start with, a little reminder and overview of AI, generative AI, agentic AI. What is the current situation? How do you see the evolution in the next couple of months or years? What is your overview on this point? Jaymin, can I start with you?
Sure. So I think it's important for us to consider that artificial intelligence is a really diverse and broad field that has been in existence since the 1950s. So AI is not new. And, in my role, I work with numerous client organizations across virtually every industry. Many organizations have been already using different forms of AI, like predictive AI and corresponding analytics, for many years, if not decades. What's relatively newer and what has really sparked the excitement about AI more broadly has been the advent of generative AI, specifically the launch of ChatGPT in late November 2022. And I think the reason why the world became suddenly excited and both fearful about AI in general with ChatGPT, even though AI has been with us since the 1950s, was because with ChatGPT, we saw widespread and easy, fast adoption of advanced AI models that are able to interact in a two-way street with us as humans. Previous forms of AI, I would describe as a one-way street where a human end user may tell the AI model to do X and it executes, it doesn't talk back. Now we have something like ChatGPT and various other models like Claude and DALL-E that are able to interact in a two-way street with us as human end users, almost seemingly like there's a sophisticated human behind the model, which there is not, but that's how it seems. And even since the launch of ChatGPT, we've seen significant improvements within the generative AI landscape. So now we have multimodal models within generative AI, which means no longer are these models restricted to just text or just images, and rather they're able to cross multiple domains of human intelligence in creating original content. So I would say the fundamental way that generative AI differs from all other forms of AI that have pre-existed it is in its ability to create new content across various domains of human intelligence, like text and images and videos. In more recent months, like 6 to 12 months, we've also seen the advent of agentic AI, which is able to execute tasks and actually make decisions autonomously without fixed rules or predefined outcomes. So that's, I would say, an even more frontier form of AI technology. Alexandra, you posed the question, what's coming up in the next months or handful of years? Currently, there's various tech developer companies that are experimenting with, it has various terms like embodied AI, humanoid AI. Here we're talking about AI agents and generative AI systems that are infused with within a physical entity. And so they have a physical embodiment and go much beyond just text or images or videos. They're able to interact with the physical world around them and with humans as well, using things like computer vision technology, for example, and real-time sensors in order to gather real-time data about what's going on in their physical surroundings.
I would jump in and add that while AI is a new frontier, we may already have existing legal principles and causes of action to deal with any claims or injuries that arise out of AI. And on the insurance space, you have a cyber market that's been around for roughly 20 years or so that may already be suited to address the issues that may arise at a AI and as its use continues to progress. Even though this is new technology, it essentially presents a lot of the same risks that you had before: somebody getting hurt, somebody's property getting damaged, or you may have intellectual property claims. There are already a robust body of law and statutes and attorneys who are suited to take advantage of pursuing claims should they arise out of AI. And it's not really entirely clear that we need a new set of laws or even insurance policies to deal with the various risks that AI presents.
We will go there. Thank you, Scott. You're giving a perfect segue for the next questions, but I just want to step back because for me, you are the specialist, and these series were created to sort of educate. That's what I was sharing with Jaymin, the non-specialists like me and like probably other people in the audience. I have a question about the implementation of AI. Do you think there will be different stages of implementation within organizations, within industries, countries? And I'm going to give you an example, and you will understand what I mean behind. For instance, the legal profession are very reluctant for confidentiality reasons, just like banking industry, to implement AI. I mean, I don't, for financial reasons as well, because smaller organizations do not have the necessary means to create their own AI in order to protect data privacy, in order to protect, in order to respect the confidentiality. I'll give you another example. When I started as a lawyer in France, I was dictating my pleadings, on a dictaphone where a secretary would type them. And everyone was announcing the arrival of software that you will just talk to the computer and it will write. It never came. It never came into effect. This was like this was a promise that I've never seen in this. Another example, when internet started, just after Minitel, countries that were using Minitel, they had like a couple of years of delay in the implementation of internet. So what is your point of view about that? Because I feel like there will be different tiers of implementation, and I'm just trying to anticipate, and I'm just interested in your point of view as a specialist of how this will affect us and the legal profession, but not only, of course.
Well, I can jump in and give some of my experience as a lawyer and in my firm about how we use AI. First of all, our lawyers at my firm are not allowed to use ChatGPT for client work. We have a specialized product that keeps any information within a confidential, secure system. So, we can't, as lawyers, we can't put confidential client information out into the world without client's permission. So, as lawyers, and I think a lot of law firms are looking at special solutions that are appropriate for law firms. But I have heard of instances of lawyers at different firms who have used ChatGPT and even used it to file a brief, and you have the problem of hallucinations that people are filing briefs generated by ChatGPT of cases that just simply do not exist. And it's obviously quite embarrassing and could be quite detrimental for any lawyer who files a brief with hallucinated citations. So I think, at least with the legal industry, as far as I've seen, we are taking kind of a slow and specialized look into using AI, but clearly the future is with AI, and it will certainly benefit drafting pleadings and doing legal research. But you have to obviously be very mindful of client confidentiality, and you also have to be mindful that what you're getting out of ChatGPT and similar systems may not be accurate, and it's part of your professional duty whenever you put something into the world or to a court, that you need to make sure that everything in your submission is accurate. And we're not quite there with AI yet.
You don't have an internal AI, right?
We do have an internal AI.
You do have an internal AI. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you, Scott. So I'm sorry, I misled you by inviting our attendees to our participants to write in the chat. The chat is disabled. You can ask your questions through Q&A, please. I apologize about that. Jaymin, you were working with so many companies. You have a different perspective, a non-lawyer perspective of my question. What is your input on this?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Because there are certainly various data privacy and security risks, as well as various others like technological errors, the hallucinations that Scott mentioned, as well as various other liability considerations. But, you know, one of the things that I think has been a bit unique about the adoption of generative AI relative to other technologies is that generative AI landed in the hands of the retail, everyday individual before it was commercial grade. You know, typically when you look at the adoption cycle of new technologies, they tend to follow a path of starting out as military grade, then becoming commercial grade, and then becoming retail grade. Whereas with ChatGPT and various other models that have launched since late 2022, they really reversed the trend on that. And so across industries with organizations that I've worked with, I've seen that enterprises are playing catch up with the fact that this technology is already here, whether company leadership likes it or not. And you can safely assume that there's at least one employee that is using some public version of a generative AI model that's out there, whether or not the company leadership is aware and whether or not the company leadership thinks that's acceptable. So even in cases where various organizations have been very thoughtful about proactively developing acceptable use policies, specifying if it's okay to use publicly available Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT, there's a bit of a disconnect that I see happening where even if that is communicated up front to employees, someone's on their phone or someone's on their personal device using these tools. I mean, anecdotally, I've heard in medical settings where doctors and surgeons are using ChatGPT, the public version, while on the job. So the question is, what can companies do about that? This comes to a key consideration around thinking about risk management when it comes to generative AI. A common misconception I come across is that because generative AI is a technology, the risk side should sit with the CISO's office or the CTO's office. And that is very much a misconception. The CISO and the CTO need to be involved, but they're just looking at one of numerous aspects of risk management that span across technical, but also process and governance, as well as people and education controls. So it's also legal and compliance, and it's also CHROs, as well as business leads who are out there on the front lines looking at what's actually working and how are employees actually using these tools and with customer facing contexts. I think the key control that's necessary to mitigate against what's already happening someone out there using these publicly available tools that, I mean, essentially, once you, if an employee at your company is using the public version of Claude or ChatGPT and entering sensitive proprietary data, that data in most cases gets handed over, the IP rights thereof get handed over to the developer company, which can then, in theory, use that company proprietary data to train a future version of, say, ChatGPT 5.0, at which point anyone with the appropriate skills to try to reverse engineer what went into that training data set can and will access your company's proprietary data. So there needs to be, I think, a heightened level of iterative educational controls that are put around this, similar to how when organizations went from using fax machines to using email to transmit data, it still took many years before your average employee just understood, I shouldn't use my personal Gmail account or Hotmail back then to transmit sensitive company information. That required lots of education and a cultural shift within organizations. And I believe that's where we need to get to, because to your point, Alexandra, companies are hesitant to adopt this tool depending on the industry and the organization's leadership. But the fact is, regardless of their hesitancy and caution, this tool is here and people are already using it, whether they like it or not.
I hear you. Scott, did you have a training when you implemented AI at the office?
Absolutely. You have to do a whole training, an interactive training before you're allowed to even access the AI software.
So what is do you have anything to add on what are the potential mitigation measures to mitigate the risk of AI?
I echo what Jaymin said about education is incredibly important before AI is rolled out in an enterprise, and you need clear lines about what are the permissible uses and education about what are the potential risks when you are using AI for your job. And the potential risks are the type of things that may give rise to liability. And that's one of the reasons why you need to be very careful when you're rolling out AI in your enterprise, and that people are educated and know what the limitations of AI are.
Responsive use of AI, right?
Exactly.
Responsible use of AI. Yeah. Thank you so much. Let's dive into the core of our discussion today and the insurance landscape. It is probably a misconception, but it was my understanding that current and existing policy are not able to cover all the potential risks of AI. What can you tell us about that, please? Yeah. Are there any specific AI solutions, or are the existing policy enough? What is your opinion on that?
So I would say on a broad basis, so at Marsh, we've done extensive analyses so far, assessing whether there's completely new risks that have surfaced, just inherently from the technology that is generative AI. And our response to that question is, so far, no. If we think, and Scott's already mentioned some of these, data privacy and security risks have been concerns for many decades. But generative AI may certainly amplify them, especially as these models rely on massive volumes of training data and, of course, the transmission of prompt data and output data as well. Misusing technology to generate harmful content has long been associated with social media platforms, also not new, but can certainly be amplified by generative AI systems that are enabling hyper-realistic deepfakes that might lead to wire transfer fraud or impersonation scams down the line. IP rights, Scott mentioned this. Again, this is a familiar risk category, I know that there is various legal questions that are being battled out within courts when it comes to IP and AI. But again, we're still talking within the bucket of IP rights infringement, and hallucinations, while a feature that is seemingly unique to generative AI, is another form of technological errors, which again is a familiar category. And so how does that translate into an insurance perspective? So Marsh believes that on a broad basis, existing lines and products of insurance products can sufficiently address the bulk of AI and generative AI exposures. Again, coming back to how AI has been with us since the 1950s, numerous organizations globally have been using AI for decades. And so we expect existing insurance products across different lines to have already afforded coverage against various AI exposures and to continue to. The question is, well, does that change in the context of generative AI? Insofar as there's no completely net new risk category, we don't think that there is a need to create a net new line of insurance just for AI. In particular, because these technologies are increasingly becoming integrated into our everyday business practices in a general purpose way. And so even if you were to have, here's a line of insurance just for AI, and then here's one that's not for AI, when it comes to claims processing, I don't know how you would quite tease out, well, this was an AI incident and this was not an AI incident in black and white terms in the future, and would lead to, I think, not necessarily serving the best interests of end policyholders at the end of the day, who want fast and inefficient claims processing, of course. That being said, we have seen some specific AI wordings and products come out, and they tend to fall into three categories. So the first is around standalone AI-specific products. The second is around affirmative coverage endorsements. And the third is around exclusionary endorsements specific to AI. So I'll start with the standalone AI products category. Here we see two subcategories that have surfaced. One is around what's called a performance guarantee. It's really an AI warranty product. And this, we believe, can provide a significant value for model developers and model vendors who want to be able to reassure their own enterprise customers that in the event that there is what's known as model error, essentially model error is intrinsic model degradation in performance, has nothing to do with any external incident or event. It's just the model deteriorating in performance over time. In that event, the model vendor or developer will then indemnify their enterprise customers up to a certain amount. This can be really useful, I think, especially in these transitional years where a lot of organizations are recognizing if they don't adopt AI, they're going to fall behind. But at the same time, there's a lot of perceived unknowns and uncertainties that I think drive a lot of fear and hesitation about adopting AI. So the performance guarantee product can be very valuable in such instances. There's also some general liability AI-specific products that are out there. Generally speaking, our perspective is that the coverage is afforded by these standalone AI general liability products are already provided within existing lines, whether it's tech E&O and cyber, or commercial general liability, or employment practices liability, and what have you. So I've mentioned two other categories, which are endorsements, one affirmative coverage and exclusionary. The affirmative coverage endorsements, for the most part, are just clarificatory in nature, reassuring the end policyholder that, yes, the core coverage afforded within your cyber policy will continue to apply in the context of AI being used. The one exception to that has been from AXA XL, and they've released an affirmative coverage endorsement specifically just for model developers. And then the exclusionary endorsements, I've seen a handful. These are all in the minority, by the way. On a broad basis, most carriers are not moving to exclude or introduce new AI standalone products. But in the case of exclusionary endorsements, I've seen some across tech E&O and intellectual property, as well as a business owner's policy. Although they're very different kinds of products, they all kind of have a blanket exclusion saying where AI was used, we will not provide coverage. But those have typically been for specific client cases, and again, are very few and far in between.
Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you so much, Jaymin. It was very educative. Scott, do you have another perspective from as a legal practitioner?
Yeah,
from
I
what
do.
you've seen in practice.
I think any company, including whether they're using AI or not, needs to do a risk analysis and figure out what type of claims are they exposed to, what type of losses might they sustain, and then they need to look at, well, is there a coverage home for this particular risk? You could have a risk of somebody getting hurt, as I mentioned before, or property damage, somebody losing money as part of a financial transaction, or for example, if you're a law firm, if you use AI and you give a client bad advice based on using AI, or you use AI to help you draft a brief and you submit it to a court and there are negative consequences that arise for the client, where do you go for coverage in that type of situation? And it's always a helpful exercise to periodically step back, figure out what are the risks that you're facing, and if these risks turn into claim or losses, where do you go for coverage of those claims or losses? And it's something you need to do periodically because insurance policies change and particular risk profiles change. And there are certain risks that you just can't insure, but there are certainly a lot that you can insure. And as Jaymin said, at least with respect to the cyber insurance space, there should be homes for most type of claims that involve cyber acts, and including AI, that should already be covered by existing cyber policy. So you don't need to go out and buy an AI specific policy, which is really not something I'm seeing my clients doing just yet. But we are seeing broader adoption of cyber policies in particular as more and more enterprises face various type of cyber risks. So again, I would commend all policyholders and all companies to, do a periodic risk assessment and then figure out whether and where those risks might be covered. And they might be covered under multiple types of policies. For instance, a law firm might have a malpractice policy and it might have a cyber policy, and a particular claim might give rise to coverage under both policies, which is a good thing. Or there could be a particular claim that could be excluded under both sets of policies. And it's always important for policyholders to understand where they do have coverage and where they might not have coverage, and also areas where it might be gray as to whether there's coverage or not.
I would just add, I completely agree with Scott, what you're saying around doing ongoing iterative risk assessment exercises. And in fact, that's the same thing that Marsh has been advising our clients in terms of we help our clients develop risk scenario driven analyses of whether their existing insurance program is sufficient. And a really important question that every organization needs to look at is, even if we don't need to purchase a new product, are our existing limits and retentions appropriate, given that certain risks may be amplified in the context of either developing and or using generative AI models? And so that needs to be an ongoing risk assessment exercise for sure.
Do you think that the insurance company will underwrite and price differently the generative AI coverage?
Yeah, so we recognize that generative AI risks may, over time, need to be underwritten and priced differently because so currently no one has sufficient historical loss data, which makes sense. You know, it's only been a couple of years since ChatGPT launched, and this can certainly pose a challenge. What I expect will happen is that generative AI will present nuances to risk assessment and pricing within existing lines of insurance. And as we amass more loss data, insurers will be able to more precisely price in potential amplification of corresponding risks and price that accordingly within those existing lines. But I mean, I guess a bit of a hopeful note there, which is this is certainly not a challenge that is unique to generative AI, right? So as an industry, the insurance world has confronted such challenges many times historically with every new technology that has transpired, and we will continue to confront such challenges. But at least so far, the insurance industry has risen to that challenge of helping organizations transfer risks and become more resilient against the face of new technologies that afford both great opportunities but also risks. Like we've seen this happen from, you know, with the internet to the cloud to blockchain and digital assets. I recall a handful of years ago, insurers were looking at the question of, do we need new policies for non-fungible tokens back when that was a fad.
Thank you so much. Scott, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I agree certainly with everything Jaymin said. Again, there is a road, and I'm looking at some of the questions that have popped up asking about
we'll go there. We finish ours, and then I'll start with the questions that participants and also the questions we received by email prior to the webinar. So we'll go there.
Sure. Well, I do think there is, you know, you already have a robust cyber market that should respond to most type of risks that AI is presenting to corporations around the world. It is an evolving market, and I think you will see as time goes on that if there are holes in the coverage, particularly for AI, that there will be insurers that will tout their ability to fill it, whether they're adding endorsements or other specialized coverages. If there emerges a gap in the cyber coverage space with regard to AI, we're not seeing that yet, but you know, we are still in the early days of adoption of AI, and it's an evolving market, and I'm sure insurers will respond. You know, it's to make sure they're competitively offering attractive terms to companies who are using AI and are facing all the risks that go along with AI.
But do you, as a practitioner, do you have in mind, and it's okay if you don't, but do you have like in mind a case where a client came and there is a damage, there is a potential financial loss or whatever, and you were not able to trigger and to action a coverage, and you were like in a sort of a gap? I'm just curious if you have an example in mind, and I know you have the confidentiality and everything,
Sure.
but just
I can give one example in the abstract. Generally, cyber policies do not cover property damage or bodily injury. There are some specialized products that do cover that. So if you have a situation where, say, you know, you can envision a scenario, somebody uses AI to launch a cyber attack to hack into hospitals' mainframes, and this results in people's ventilators getting shut off. Generally, under cyber policy, that type of injury is not going to be excluded because there's an exclusion for bodily injury. And if you were to look at your general liability policy, there's often cyber-related exclusions for things that happen based on an unauthorized use of a computer system. So you could have a gap in that situation, you know, and giving an example for a hospital. On one hand, a cyber policy generally will have a bodily injury exclusion, and we're seeing in the general liability space a lot of cyber exclusions added to those policies. So that type of situation may not be covered.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. Jaymin, yeah, you want to chime in?
Well, yeah, just to add to that, you know, so there are products that can provide endorsements to add, you know, coverage for bodily injury or property damage that is caused initially by a cyber event. And this has to do with how the whole silent cyber movement transpired, of course, where PNC lines started excluding coverage where cyber events were concerned. My hypothesis is that as AI adoption increases, and in particular, as we see more embodied AI and humanoid AI, which I referenced earlier, achieve greater scale, there will likely be a stronger demand for cyber products that come with BI and PD coverage as well, whether that's in the form of an endorsement or perhaps it's integrated within the policy language over time. But you know, there haven't been, and as Scott mentioned, it's a hypothetical for now. I think it's a hypothetical for now in most cases, only because we're still waiting for that technological adoption to happen, where you're essentially merging the physical world risks with digital world risks, which I've increasingly been calling phygital risks to indicate that the two worlds are in fact merging over time.
Yes, thank you. So we go to the questions that are very interesting and diverse questions from the participants. Before we wrap it up, Jaymin, do you see any best practices, and you, Scott, as well? Do you see, or is it still too early? Because we don't have enough precedent cases, or do we have enough precedent cases? But do you see like a policy and building up basis in the use of a generative AI?
Yes,
Yeah.
so there are in fact best practices, and this is what we've been advising our clients at Marsh on increasingly. So currently we're advising on 3 key sets of risk controls that need to be adopted with implementation of generative AI technologies. So those 3 controls are, first, technical, which corresponds to more of your cybersecurity controls. So some of your existing cybersecurity controls may need to be updated and or replaced to more effectively manage and mitigate generative AI risks. The second is process controls around governance policies and procedures. So here we're talking about instituting board-level governance and cross-functional senior leadership oversight to provide principles and structure in determining what's acceptable as generative AI use cases and models, and then the corresponding risk management involved. And the third set of controls is people, educational, which I've already alluded to, ensuring that any employee who accesses generative AI tools, which you can, again, safely assume is everyone these days, who has access to the internet and some kind of device is accessing a Gen AI tool, they need to be aware of some of the risks that come with utilizing these AI tools. It's when I mean, for folks who aren't working full time in the risk management space, why would the average individual outside of the risk management space think about the data privacy and security lens every time they open up their laptop to access ChatGPT? So that's some of the education that's required. Also, to learn not to be a victim to some of the ongoing social engineering attacks that are becoming increasingly convincing and increasingly realistic. So I believe here specialized reskilling and even upskilling may be necessary. On the process and governance controls, one thing I really want to mention, because it's important, is that it's not sufficient to just hire like a chief AI officer, for example, and say, you're going to bring centralized governance to the organization. Effective governance when it comes to generative AI, because it's such a widely accessible and adopted technology and its general purpose, requires centralized multi-stakeholder leadership engagement with the board, with the CISO, the chief privacy or data officer, legal compliance, CHRO, business leads. And at every organization where there's a risk leader function, like a chief risk officer or a risk manager, that risk leader in particular needs to play perhaps the most critical role in bringing all of the different stakeholders together, because the CHRO is going to be thinking about his or her people lens. The CISO and the CTO, on the other hand, is going to be thinking about the technical lens. And all of those different lenses need to be complementing each other. So for example, let's say the CISO believes that he or she has implemented the most robust set of data privacy and security controls. None of those technical controls matter if one of your employees goes home and starts using public versions of these generative AI models and starts putting in sensitive data. And so the CISO needs to be, in this particular example, collaborating with the CHRO to communicate what controls are in place, what realistically are the limitations of such controls, and the additional education and cultural awareness that needs to be implemented across the organization.
Yeah, thank you so much. Do you think it's the emergence of a new profession, or a more like a, a project manager of a multidisciplinary collaboration?
I think
Chief
it's
AI
more
officer.
Yeah, I think it's more the latter. Like, I've seen certain organizations hire an AI specific lead. I've also seen other organizations where they don't hire a specific AI lead. From my perspective, in terms of what I've seen work well, it's really that cross-functional, multi-stakeholder governance that is needed, regardless of whether you have an AI lead or not. And so it's more like every company is going to become an AI company one day, similar to how every company, they couldn't choose to remain a brick and mortar company, and every company became an internet-based company. So in a similar vein, we need reskilling and upskilling, not just at like the junior and managerial levels, but also at the C-suite and board levels, because becoming technically fluent to some degree about the risks and opportunities about AI is, it's not going to be a choice anymore.
Absolutely agree. I cannot agree more. Scott, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like there was a time before all companies used email, and eventually companies started using email and had to hire in-house IT or outsource that. And I think we're seeing kind of a similar situation here, that some companies will be able to incorporate AI with their existing staff and hire people, and some companies will need to farm that out to a service provider, and you'll see that evolve over time.
Okay, since you have the floor, I'm gonna ask you the first question from John.
Sure.
Scott, is the market for cyber insurance robust enough to allow rational pricing? Are class action suits prevalent against corporate clients? Do cyber insurance policies cover such liability? Do the insurance company defend such suits? That was a long question with
Yeah,
a lot of
there's a lot to
implications.
unpack there, but I would say there is a robust cyber insurance market. There's probably dozens of different insurers offering cyber insurance products. Nearly every major insurer is offering some sort of cyber product. So it's a fairly mature space, but it is evolving. As to the question of whether there are class action suits prevalent against corporate clients, and whether cyber insurance policies cover them, there have been certainly class actions against policyholders for things such as data breaches. We were seeing that more probably a decade or so ago, where retailers were getting hacked and customers' credit card information was stolen, and you saw a lot of class actions brought against policyholders. And for the most part, cyber policies did respond favorably to them. There are always coverage issues and reasons why insurers may not pay claims, and that's where firms like mine come in. We don't see that stopping, but again, it's important to understand what a cyber policy covers and does not cover, and what the requirements of that policy are. So if for instance, typically cyber policies require notice of a claim during the policy period, and if you don't provide notice during the policy period, and instead try to do that months afterwards, you may not get coverage, and there may be a coverage issue, and that often results in litigation with insurers to the extent there's a reasonable argument that a policyholder has that there should be coverage. Cyber policies do provide what's called a duty to defend, where if there's a lawsuit, even if it's groundless, against a company alleging a potentially covered claim, the insurer will defend that claim. And there are often issues with regard to whether the policyholder is able to use its own preferred counsel, or whether the policyholder has to use the counsel that the insurer selects. And often there is guidance in the policy how to resolve that type of situation. And often there are disputes, and you have to work your way through those disputes.
Thank you, Scott. Jaymin, do you mind taking the second question in the Q&A? Are insurance companies seeing demand for AI-specific products from users of the technology? All of you already partly answered that question.
Yeah. So broadly speaking, no. I think so. Users of AI, generative AI technologies, are starting with the question, do I need additional and new coverage that I don't already have within my existing insurance program? And as I mentioned earlier, we really haven't seen, at least not yet, a net new category of risk that has transpired. And so often this becomes more of a conversation around, do I need to increase my limits? Are my retentions appropriate given the potential for amplification of certain risks but not others? For AI-specific products, not really. There is not a demand that I'm seeing on a broad basis from users as well, because again, most users will not want to purchase two sets of insurance products, one for AI, like imagine a directors and officers product for non-AI circumstances, and then a second D&O product for just AI. From the end policyholders or the end users perspective, if the coverage is there, then they don't really tend to want to purchase two sets of the same coverage just for different circumstances. The one area where I have seen some demand is around the AI performance guarantee, where as an end user of an AI solution or a service, I may want some kind of warranty solution that gives me indemnification in the event that something goes wrong intrinsic to the AI model that I'm relying on. And to me as an end user, it seems like a black box. And so I may want that kind of reassurance that in the event that there's some kind of financial loss or some business operational failure that is directly tied to intrinsic model error from the third party model developer, then I may want to purchase that performance guarantee or warranty product.
Thank you, Jaymin. So we have another question on the Q&A. I don't know if it's in your expertise to answer that, but Miles Pomper is asking, what about the risk that generative AI could be used to help adversaries, particularly non-state actors, develop weapons of mass destruction or other CBRNE weapons? Is this liability addressed by current insurance policy or liability rules? This was a concern, for instance, related to dirty bombs or radiological weapons after 9/11.
I'm happy to jump in, and I'd say we could have a whole webinar on this topic, and I don't think I can do justice to answering this question within the remaining time we have. But I will say that this is a big issue of concern of cyber insurers. Cyber insurers have war exclusions. With certain of them have carve-backs for cyber terrorism, but that is it's a very hot topic, and it's something the insurance industry is very sensitive to, because if, for instance, there was a wide-scale event that affected lots of policyholders across the insurer's portfolio, that potentially could bankrupt the insurer. So there is, extreme sensitivity about risks of state actors and cyber terrorists that are not affiliated with state actors. So it's a very important thing to look at your policy and figure out what it does and doesn't cover in that situation. And there may just be certain things that cyber insurers do not want to cover. And one of the big things is a cyber war between state actors.
Well, thank you so much. Jaymin, do you have something to add on this question?
No, I mean, I agree with everything Scott said. Beyond just the specific risk, I think it's also important to consider that there is various, non-AI specific exclusions that are already in place that continue to apply in the context of AI and generative AI exposures. So war exclusions being one such, but there's various like privacy regulation exclusions, like BIPA, or professional services exclusions as well. And so, I mean, insurance isn't meant to cover every single risk out there. Certain risks are not insurable. And we expect, again, that to continue in a similar vein in the context of generative AI as well.
Thank you. I believe, Scott, there is an additional layer. Miriam is asking a clarification. The warranty products you mentioned are being bought by both developers and end users.
So it's being bought by developers and vendors and issued or passed on to the end users of their AI products.
Thank you so much. And we only have time for one last question. I believe we're a bit over it, but Roxana is asking, given the rapid emergence of agentic AI systems where autonomous agents perform complex tasks with minimal human oversight? Are you or your firm beginning to anticipate and account for the unique liability, compliance, and risk implication they may introduce? What frameworks or scenario are you exploring to future-proof your policies or litigation strategies?
So I can respond to the risk framework part, and I'll defer to Scott on the litigation strategy aspect. So the short answer is yes. So at Marsh, we're proactively looking at risks that are transpiring from agentic AI, as well as humanoid or embodied AI as well. So we do have a framework for that. If you are interested, please do reach out. In a nutshell, agentic AI risks, we believe, actually amplify even further certain aspects of generative AI risks. And of course, as we've mentioned throughout, generative AI tends to amplify existing categories of risks across various risk buckets. So in particular, when it comes to agentic AI, we're likely to see even further amplification of data privacy and security risks, as well as technological errors. After all, agentic AI is executing autonomously on various tasks without fixed rules. Counterparty risk will also increase, most likely, as well as regulatory risk. I haven't seen widespread adoption of agentic AI within enterprise settings because of these various amplified risks. And a lot of organizations that I've spoken with, at least, are very much focused on the question, how can we implement mitigation controls prior to implementing agentic AI tools?
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for such an interesting and informative conversation today. I believe we're already 3 minutes over our 1 hour commitment. I'm afraid we cannot answer. We have around 6 other questions. Maybe you will be gracious enough to answer to our participants by email, and we'll try to put you in touch. I'm sorry that Kathryn from the Stimson Center was not able, for technical reasons, to join us today. And hopefully she will be able to attend to other meetings. Thank you, Jaymin. Thank you, Scott. It's been very interesting. Thank you for your time today. And thanks to our participants for your interesting questions and for being with us today. You can find the future events on the website of the Washington Foreign Law Society. We're looking forward to seeing you again. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Bye.